Mentioned earlier on, you've been behind some of the biggest sales, certainly in recent years. What have been the sort of memorable ones for you?
Memorable ones. I always reference this short wheelbase here actually as a really good one. That was a really good client of mine. That was one of my first clients that I'd sort of built up from the first steps of buying big old cars to managing restorations for him. And he brought his father onto the scene, who is a very, very successful gentleman. Who is now, senior in years in terms of, I think he's in his 80s now, but really fit, exciting guy who's just got this story to tell about his life, and a real perfectionist. So we got on really well, and he was like, I want a short wheelbase. So this car was I went to go and see it in Italy, and it was one of those situations where I knew the price before I went, so I went to see it, and then they sat me down for lunch and said, do you like the car? And I said, yeah, of course. No, I really like it. And I said, oh, great, so it's a deal then. And I'm thinking, can we negotiate or can I think about it? And it was like, no, you came, you knew the price, surely we're doing the deal. And eventually, after a long story short, because we don't have time for it, but eventually the customer that I had in mind for it, when I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do here, and I agreed to buy it, and I didn't quite have all the money to pay for it, he called me one morning at 7 in the morning and said, you know that short wheelbase you've been talking about, let's do the deal. So I was like, I'm off the hook, saved. And then when we restored the car, as we started researching it, we found out that it had some really rare features. So it's got a different colour roof, the interior is two-tone, it's got a different steering wheel, different dash, different armrests that had been changed the last time it was restored in the 80s. So we were able to research it, and it was really exciting to sort of present to the world this car that no one had really ever seen before, as it was when it was new. So, that's a standout one for me, especially because it's start to finish. There's also another car that we'll see later, which is a 14 Louvre Tour de France, which Mum and Dad owned in the early 90s and sold in the late 90s, famously to pay for school fees. And we went to an auction in America in about 2007 or 8, and it was being sold by the guy we'd sold it to, and we'd sold it for something like $600,000, and it sold for $6 million. I'll never forget that Dad turned around to me and said, you realise your education cost over $5 million? Yeah. And I was thinking, yeah, but it was worth it, hopefully. And then later on we bought that car and re-restored it for that client, and now it lives with us. So, there are lots of stories like that, and adventures, and going to places all over the world, managing to buy a certain black McLaren F1 from a really famous collection that everyone talks about but no one has access to, and we got into there and got it out. And when it came to the UK, everyone was just like, how on earth did you do that? And we tried to keep it really quiet, but as soon as that rumour was out there, it was just spread like wildfire. And the same with the Rob Walker short wheelbase, which actually Jeremy sold when he was still at DK in about 2013, but such a significant car, and had belonged at the time to a friend of the family as well, a long-term client, who just came to us and said, look, I've got a family, position whereby I need to deal with this business, buy this property, do this, so I've got to sell the short wheelbase. And we sold it in secret, and it today it's well known that it's with Ross Brawn, but at the time it was top secret. But when the secret came out, it was just like wildfire. And we were all at Retromobile at the time, and everyone was coming up to us saying, have you sold that car? Have you sold that car? And that's kind of more exciting because it was such a secret for such a long time. Because
it's interesting as well that, you've got your Ferrari sort of specialist position.
That's where it started,
if you like. But actually, I mean, when we just look around here, McLaren, Maserati, Porsche, you're everywhere.
It goes hand in hand, and I always find that primarily our clients are Ferrari guys, but they will have other brands within the collection. So it'll be 80% Ferrari and 20% other stuff. And as a result of price points and trends, you tend to end up getting involved in other models and makes and understanding them and learning about them. And again, it's part of the journey. So it's helping someone put together this amazing collection, and it doesn't have to be just Ferrari. I think every GT owner should have an F1 as well. And an 8C, and all the great stuff. Yeah, there's a few other bits.
But the specialism Ferrari started with your parents and your dad.
Yeah, but we were champion specialists originally.
Is that where your heart lies as well?
I mean, I'm lucky that I've really, the greatest Ferraris in the world. I've been there, I've seen them, I've touched them, I've driven them all my life, and it's amazing how I see these cars come back around that I remember from when I was 7 years old. And one of my customers, who's really great long-term client, came to us originally because he had been researching all these mega cars and being offered lots of really good stuff by all the brokers because everyone knew that he was a new man on the scene. And he said, every time I went to look it up on, there's a website called Barchetta, every time I looked it up, there's always DK Engineering or David Cossium in there. So it just seemed like I needed to deal with you guys because you knew the cars. And that's kind of the way it's gone. It's just
Yeah.
because we've been involved in so many of them over the years. You stick to the Ferrari thing.
Yeah.